Hello everyone, this will be our last video on chapter 2. And in this video we're going to look at some issues that come up with our pure economic way of thinking. And I'll kind of just dive into it, but when we get into this, the first thing we may ask is, when we're looking at our models and all that, do people necessarily act rationally? Or the way that we would want, the way in our study in economics we would want them to? And the answer to this first question is not necessarily. Um, right, especially as individuals, people and firms aren't always going to act in a way that fits our way of thinking. Whereas when we could think about something like our sunk costs that we talked about a while ago, right? And the economic way of thinking is, I take my $200 to the casino, I lose it, and instead of saying, "Oh, I need to make it back," and instead of ignoring the sunk cost like I should do, a lot of the times we'll go through and say, "Well, if I just do one more play, I'll win it all back." Right? So people, clearly, they're not always going to act in a way that we would expect them to. However, despite this and the fact that individuals may not, um, it's still worth our while to look at to analyze our behavior and stuff with our tools of economic analysis. And what we're going to come down to here is largely looking at the an individual versus a group and kind of how statistics works. So if you were wearing a Chicago Bulls t-shirt, right, I could come up and say, "Well, you must be a Chicago Bulls fan." As an individual, maybe you just like the way the shirt looks, maybe it was a gift, maybe you don't care about basketball in the slightest. But for you, right, you're just wearing that shirt. But you're not a fan. Now, if I had a group of 10,000 people and say 500 of them were wearing the same Chicago Bulls t-shirt, a lot of the people in that group of 500 among our larger population would actually be basketball fans. So you as an individual are free to break your stereotype. However, in the aggregate, in the group population, we kind of don't expect our statistics to. We expect that, hey, if a certain group is supposed to like a certain thing or act a certain way, when we get to the larger group, we're going to see that behavior or preference within our group. In this case, that group is our group is the people who wear basketball t-shirts. So the second question we may look at in this case is, right, we understand people don't act the way they should, but should they act the way that economics says they should? And with this, I'm going to add one little bit to what's on the slide. So the slide says they should not act this way. I'm going to take it a step further and say that they should not always act this way. And that is, there are times where the economic way is kind of the way to go. If you're at a casino, again, our casino example where we just lost $200, it would be best for us to just say, "Hey, I lost the money. Let's go home." Right? It stinks you lost money, but it's basically treat it like an expensive trip to an arcade. However, there's some instances where maybe it's not our best interest to, or maybe we should not act in a way. Uh, this may be a situation where, suppose we're applying for a job and you and I are applying for it. You're the number one applicant and I'm the number two applicant. Um, if I knew I could get away with it, I may send a threatening email, I may send a threatening letter, or I may threaten you in some way or actually do physical harm to you. And in this case, right, I'm going to do this physical harm. And in this example, it may actually make me better off as long as I don't get caught, because then I get the job and you don't. However, we know that, right, we as a society, and we know we shouldn't be out sending threats and doing all that stuff to people. So when we think of economics, we're going to notice that we're always going to be portrayed as being self-interested. But as we go through economics, we're going to note that we're not going to be giving like moral instruction. So if we think about, if you found a bag of a $40,000 bag of cash on the side of the road, economics is going to say you should probably just keep it. Whereas From a moral perspective, you might have a little bit of a trade-off and a little bit of a decision to make. Do I keep it or do I turn it in? But one of the things we will see in econ is our ultimate goal with this economic behavior is going to be describe the world and our behavior as it actually exists. And as we move up the economics ladder, we're able to get a more precise view and a more accurate description of people. So whereas in our basic model, right, we're going to say, well, if we were deciding between going to McDonald's and Burger King, at this point in our class, we'd probably just say, well, if whichever one's cheaper is the one I'll go to because they sell similar products. So if McDonald's is cheaper, I'll go to McDonald's. If Burger King is cheaper, I'll go to Burger King. However, as we get more into economics and as you move up your studies in economics, you'll kind of start to add in more things. So you might say, well, between McDonald's and Burger King, which one uses less additives to their beef? Which one does one of them have a four meat concoction? Am I more likely to get my food spit in at one or the other? Right? We have stuff like that, and as we build in more and get more involved in economics, we would throw in more variables and get more complex. For this course, we keep it fairly straightforward where we're dealing with, maybe one, maybe two variables, but for the most part, we try to keep things straightforward. So in attempting to describe the world, one of the things we're going to use and try to use is what are called positive statements. And these are those that either describe or attempt to describe the world as it is. So if I tell you, and again, when I say this, I don't know when you're watching this. I don't know where you're watching this, but I might say it's cloudy outside. Right. So in our situation, it may or may not be cloudy, but I'm saying this as a matter of fact, in a factual way. So even though I may be incorrect, I'm attempting to describe the world as it is. It's cloudy outside. You can look out. It's either cloudy or it's not. That's a factual statement, so it's a positive. When we're attempting to describe the world, the one thing we will try to avoid is what are called normative statements. And these are where I say this is how the world should be. From a scientific perspective, normative statements aren't really that great because that's not really what you're trying to solve. And throughout the course, I will personally do my best to, keep those positive statements, keep things factual. And if we do have to go into an opinion, I'll always do my best to present both sides and present both sides of our argument, the pros and the cons. Because one of the things we'll see with economics is everything's going to have a trade-off. So we'll see that. So these normative statements, again, these are going to be more opinion-based. So if I were running for Congress, what I would do is I would tell you, and depending on which party I'm in and depending on what the situation, as a positive statement, I would throw a bunch of facts at you, throw some numbers that favor my party. And then I'm going to say because of all these facts or because of whatever facts I have, you should vote for me and you should let my party be in control of the government. So I'm going to take these factual statements, I'm going to take these factual statements and roll them over into that opinion of my party should be in charge of the government. So the last little thing that we're going to see in this chapter 2 is earlier in the class we mentioned Adam Smith's book Wealth of Nations from 1776, and one of the ideas that he presents in this is what's called the invisible hand. And what this tells us is that if I act in my own self-interest, that can actually lead to positive social outcomes. So suppose I were a plumber. Right, you might say that my self-interest is going to be to provide you with maybe cardboard pipes, which, as you can imagine, would probably seep through and have issues within a couple days. But I give you shoddy equipment. I go subpar on my materials because that saves me money, and I get more of your money right now. And in the short run, that may seem self-interested because I get a crazy amount of profit from your job. However, when I do this, you're going to go out, tell your friends that, hey, that econ professor is doing shoddy work on plumbing. you shouldn't go to that plumbing firm, right? So what I'm going to do is, instead of providing shoddy work or going cheap on my materials, I'm actually going to, use the best materials I can afford. Uh, and what that's going to do is that's going to make your job better, make your plumbing better. But since I'm using better work, you're going to go tell your friends and family that, hey, if you use Kevin's plumbing, you're going to have a great experience. Everything's done well, and so on. And that's going to be a better interest for me. And that is actually going to serve my self interest, because now I'm going to have repeat customers and my network's going to grow. And maybe my firm will grow into a rather large firm. The other thing that the invisible hand will do, it'll actually encourage businesses to offer goods that meet the needs of customers. So suppose that in Ames or Boone, between Ames and Boone, there were no barbers or hairstylists. If with the invisible hand, what we would do is, if somebody came in to either of those towns and opened up a new barber shop or a hairstylist shop, or one of each came through, we would reward them by giving them our business, right? So that person is going to become better off by going to an underserved community. In this sense, I know there are hairstylists and barbers in both towns, but in this sense, right, our communities would be underserved in this field. Someone comes in to take care of it, and they would be rewarded with a lot of business. And in this case, that barber or hairstylist, maybe they're acting in complete their own self-interest. That is, they see a need, they go up, they take care of it just because that's going to bring a whole lot of business. But it's something where, hey, it does benefit society, because now everyone in Boone and Ames doesn't have to drive to maybe Des Moines to get a haircut. So this last little bit, it says that self-interest in economics does not imply self-interest in all aspects of life. So what this we might look at is things like your unsung heroes. So you have certain things that maybe you do that, they're not really going to get noticed. They're not going to get you your promotion. They're not going to get you a employee of the year bonus, but you take care of things a certain way, even if they go unnoticed, just because it's it's the right way to do things. And that's kind of what this is saying. Even though certain actions may not have any economic benefit for me, I may have other aspects of life where, that benefit, it does help me. It helps me to know that I'm taking proper care of my clients, or the people that work for me, or the people I work for. So that's our chapter 2. I hope this last one was interesting. And always, if you need anything, feel free to let me know.